Off to the cloud it goes. All right, everybody, be on your best behavior. Yeah, whatever.
Nah, we'll try.
Okay, welcome. So let's get started. I don't know that we need to do introductions. Most faces are familiar. Um, but Sean, you have something to share with people, yes?
Yes, well, Nancy's I've kind of consulted, but she did the programming, and we have a transitcalendar.com site, and we've created this astrology calendar that you can just go to the website and look at it, and it will adjust to your time zone. Or if you work with a digital calendar like Google Calendar or whatever on, whatever, it's a INS file, .ins file, I think it's called. Anyways, you can load that onto your personal digital calendar and reference it, search it. We have little definitions with them, but you can watch as the stuff goes and check a calendar. It's kind of like the old wall hanging calendars that we use, only I don't know if it's more detailed. We're always wondering what to add and subtract, but there's a lot in there, and it's totally free. Our product is we'll do the transits against your natal chart, but that's just if you want to pay for that. But as far as just looking at the transits, it's very simple. And I put the link in the chat, and help yourself.
Sean?
Yeah.
And then you were talking about a goddess group, Facebook group?
Yeah, well, we're doing a group kind of supporting the calendar and just chatting, and kind of like we're doing here, just doing astrology. We'll have a topic, or our kind of format is we get more than one astrologer. We have 2 or 3 or 4 astrologers, and go over someone's chart and kind of like group. And like you said earlier, we all learn from each other. Astrology is ruled by Aquarius, and that's a group consciousness. So we kind of work together, and you can see other people's styles, and it's like keeps your chops up. And it's interesting because you're always learning whether the astrologer's talking and their techniques and how they look at it. And for me, it reminds me, because I was really fortunate in LA to when I was living in LA, I think I had like 30 different professional astrology teachers and their students, and I went to many classes, and I have all these techniques in my head, and I kind of look at the wheel as a mandala, and whatever comes to mind. I don't really have a specific thing, and I just, if you know me, I'm a double Aquarian. I just start rambling like I am now. So so we have a good
Ramblings
time,
aloud.
and yeah, we're just starting this group just to have fun, like we're doing, just astrologers talking. And then when a person gets a reading from more than one astrologer, it's like more than likely, some of the chemistry might not match with one, but it's like it's very interesting, and they get a lot of information. So that's kind of what we're working at. You could just if you're interested in that, you could just email me, or look on Facebook. You could see me.
You said when you were in LA, where are you now?
I'm up in Silicon Valley, right by San Jose. Yeah.
The advantage of the Zoom. Of course, the
Yes.
disadvantage
Yes. It's
is
all
that
Zoom. Yeah.
the disadvantage is we used to meet in person on the West Side. What was the name of that restaurant?
Yeah.
Jim,
Yeah.
On
I've
Urban.
been there. Yeah. I've been there a couple
the
times, and
Urban.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
it was
know
nice.
life's
And
Yeah.
different. Yeah. It's great. Yeah.
We tried it, but it was, and it was so noisy, and there was issues with the
yeah,
hybrid feed, so we stopped.
Yeah.
It would be nice to get together once in a while, just to
well,
see
that's a
faces
good
and
idea
talk in
once in a
person.
while.
Okay.
Does the
Anybody else
chat,
have
Jim,
any
just to finish me off
Yeah.
clean, does the chat show up when you post this, or is it just for the members? Or because I'll put my email up there if anyone wants to contact me with any questions,
I don't know. I've
or you
got
know
the
what,
chat
the
up
the
on
way
my
you can just go to the website, and you have any questions, there's an email there that I'll get back to you. So anyways, that's a fun thing we do. It's free. It's a Zoom meeting just like this, and
What
we
is the
just
website?
it's in the chat, transitcalendar.com.
Okay.
And that's, like I said, it's totally free, and you could just look at it on the website, or download it if you have a calendar. I walk around with the phone, and there it is. And you're like, what's going on? Oh, because who wants to
Hallelujah.
memorize everything every day? I mean,
Hmm.
we do a lot, but sometimes you can't do astrology every second, although I strive for that.
Okay.
Sean, I don't
Thank you,
see it in
Sean.
the chat.
sir.
I don't see a link in the chat.
It was in
Oh,
there
it's-
because I
It's-
saw it
It's
there.
there.
Well, I'm clicking on what I see from you, but it's not a link.
No, it is. It's in the top of the chat. Then it's
Here,
a
I'll
second
put it.
one.
I'll put it in
Okay,
again.
okay, maybe I'm not at the top.
Sometimes you have to roll up as things move
There it
down.
is.
Yeah.
Yep,
There, I put
thanks,
it
okay.
fresh.
Oh, good.
Constellations.com.
Thank
Good.
you, Judith. and
okie dokie.
I answer all questions as best as I can. So that, please ask.
That's all we can do.
Yeah. Thanks,
Hmm.
Jim.
And what we don't know, we make up, right?
Yeah. Are we intuit maybe if it's more
Some people
accurate?
do.
Well, yeah, that's a better way to, it's a more polite way
Yeah.
to say it. Um,
But there's
Cornelia,
always,
how are
yeah.
things with you? Anything, what's happening in your world? You and Dominique up to anything?
Who you're talking to?
Cornelia.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
Cornelia.
sorry. I didn't realize you mentioned my name. I'm still waiting for the book to come out. I just got an AFA bulletin, and there was a page in there that said new releases coming soon. And my book is there, so I'm waiting.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So are we. All right. Anybody else have any announcements they want to make? Judith?
I'd like to ask you a question. Does anybody ever look at Gurmeet Singh? He's a Vedic astrologer. Yes?
Who?
No, I don't think.
Spencer
Having
says yes.
problems with my microphone, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Anyway,
Um,
he just gave his prediction and said that he also says he's a Vedic astrologer, but he says KP. Does anybody know what that means? KP astrologer?
That's an abbreviation. Yeah, that's something Vedic. I'm not sure. I took a class once with a guy who did Western and Vedic, and yeah, KP. Is that the one of the nodes? The abbreviation for the node KP?
Okay.
K2? No, I'm thinking of skiing.
Anyway, his
K2,
prediction
Rahu
just came out
K2.
the other day and said that Harris is going to win and that Trump is going to have a lot of trouble. And he said there should be another October surprise between the 20th and the election.
Hmm.
So I'm looking to see what that is.
yeah.
But of course,
Well,
anybody could make that prediction because that's the way it is now. But
yeah. Well, let's hope
No,
he's
he
right.
explains it. I guess two
okay.
pages of
Can you
explanation.
can you put a link in or type out his name or something, so I could find him? I don't know when you can, or thank you.
I have to go to the chat there. Okay, chat.
There was
Thank
one
you.
astrologer who pointed out
where
that
do you-
when Jupiter stationed retrograde, right? Just a stationed retrograde on October 9th, right?
Yes.
It stationed retrograde on the very degree of one of Trump's planets.
Mm,
Yeah, it
And
was actually on his Uranus North Node Sun.
oh, right. So this astrologer was saying that when the planet is stationary, it is amplified. The energy is amplified. And that astrologer was saying this bodes well for Trump. Jupiter stationing retrograde on his north node. Oh, that's the north
Uranus, I
node
think it was.
Uranus sun
yeah.
in the 10th house. So that
Yeah,
would be
it sounds like it could
in the Trump column, the
it
Harris
could
column,
be.
Trump column.
However, yeah, it's stationed prior to his sun. It missed his sun by about a degree, I think, in stationing. But it was sitting there for 4 weeks.
That's almost like a hurricane that's just sitting there. It's just
Yeah.
energy.
We'll see how that plays out. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
the
Okay.
stationing, I would give more weight to stationing direct than stationing retrograde, but stationing, I mean, from a positive standpoint, I would think stationing direct would be more positive than stationing retrograde, but we'll have to wait and see.
The thing that's kind of going up a flag for me is the Mars is going to station at 6 Leo, which is the north node of America, and or the 1776 chart, and it goes back and it'll square Venus, and meanwhile still work with transiting Pluto too, so opposing it. So I think it's going to be the pot's going to be boiling over, I think.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's not going to the chat. I don't know if I'm
Oh.
doing something wrong.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah,
There
you can go
was
out. I mean, what
Gourmet
was it?
is Gurmeet. His last name is
G-U-R-M.
Singh, Eet.
Okay,
Singh.
like that.
That's his last name.
Great, thank you.
Good to meet Sing. Well,
I'll
I've
do a
been
He's
little.
a
following him
sheikh.
for a time and he's been quite correct.
He's a Sikh. Good to meet Sing. That would probably make him a Sikh, would it not? Sing being a fairly common Sikh name. Okay. All
Yes.
right. Does anybody else have anything they want to contribute before we get into the program? Going once, going twice. Here we go. Share. Okay, let's see if I can remember all this correctly. Here we go. Share. Share and share alike. Here we go. Bada. Bada bing. There we go. Slide this off a little bit. Okay. So we're going to be talking about the constellations and the signs. And this is kind of like, oh, astrology history, I guess is one way to look at it. We've done our tuck around, got a calendar. We're going to look at, I only have one chart, Miracle of Miracles, but I do have a bunch of other things. So here we go. Let's see. It's Mercury is still void of course, but not for long. The moon's also void of course. Sun will make a waxing air trine to retrograde Jupiter this tonight. On the 15th, 6 major and 2 quincunx aspects, so that could be quite a busy day for folk. On the 16th, with luck, moon wobble will end, though under current circumstances it may not. That's basically when there's a lot of chaos in the world, more than normal, let's put it that way. On the 17th, 4:26 a.m., we have the super full hunter's moon at 24 Aries 35. And this is the superest of the supermoons. We've got actually having 4 supermoons in a row. The last one will be in November, which is a full moon when the Earth, when the moon is basically within at its closest approach to the Earth, or within 90% of its closest point to the Earth. So it can appear slightly larger, particularly if you catch it as it's rising or setting. Because the distortion caused by the atmosphere makes it look much bigger than when it gets up. And I can remember a few times back in my working days when I'd be going down Wilshire Boulevard and the moon would be rising right in front of me, and it would be just huge and gorgeous. On the let's see, but also on the 17th, Venus is going to go void of course. She moves from Scorpio to Sagittarius. She'll be void for about 7 hours. So mind your relationships and avoid making any major financial commitments at that time, I think. On the 19th, there will be 5
Can
major.
we talk about the 17th one more time about
Oh, sure we can.
the position of Mars and we'll talk about it more later, I suppose, but I've been absolutely obsessed with Mars in the exact square to the axis of the 23 moon and the 23 Libra. So anyway, does anyone have any genius thoughts about that? Because I can't help but think that this is a really dynamite supermoon here, that this thing with that particular planet in that particular sign is really something to take a real deep awareness of. Anyone else agree with that?
Let's see. So we're looking at. Let's get down your ways. Okay.
I
we'll go
think
down
that
there.
degree is the same as Kamala's moon. Her moon's in Aries.
Hmm.
The moon and Libra are in opposition at 23, and the Mars is at 23 of Cancer.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of a funny thing working about, Mars rules the moon, and then yet the moon rules the Mars. What an interesting problem.
Yeah. Mutual reception, quite intriguing.
Right.
In fact, she's a full moon herself. Because her son is in the opposite side, Libra.
The
Mhm.
sun's in Libra.
Yes.
Libra.
Libra.
You say Libra, I'll say Libra.
Yeah.
Tomato.
We can look at that chart later.
Yeah, okay. I
Like
just
earlier.
wanted to get it in the conversation because I'll bore you with my fascination later. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right. Let's see where am I? Where did I think I got let's see here. I can find my sharing screen any minute.
Anybody see the supermoon on September 16th with the teeny bit of an eclipse?
It was huge.
The moon
Mhm.
was huge, but the eclipse wasn't huge.
No. Yeah, the eclipse was a little,
That was a little disappointing. I ran out there and I
yeah.
went, where is it? Where is it? Yeah.
Let me get back. Let me get out
But
of
the
this and
moon
go.
was great.
Yeah.
There's my little camera.
Eh,
There it is.
I stopped sharing. I gotta get back. I lost where I was because I got sidetracked looking at other stuff. Stop that.
Easy to
I'm talking to
do.
my computer. I do that a lot. Okay, here we go. Back to screen share. Here we go. Okay. What else we got looking for us? Yeah. It it should be a fairly powerful moon. It's I agree with you on that, Spencer. So yeah, because you basically have a cardinal grand cross when you throw in Pluto. Okay. On the 19th, there's going to be 5 major and 1 quincunx aspects. On the 21st, we should have, oh, I missed the spelling, a lunar standstill north, which is basically when the moon reaches its highest point
Hmm.
uh, in northern um, or
Hemisphere?
yes, the highest point north.
Declination, you mean?
Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Okay, yes, highest northern point of northern declination. And this is it's like 28 degrees and change. So this is about as high, see the moon will be about as high overhead as it's going to get. And it'll almost look like it's overhead. Um,
Hmm.
Then on the 22nd, the sun will go void of course around 7:15 in the morning and then enter Scorpio at 3:15. On the 25th, 6:04 in the evening, Venus goes out of bounds south. So that should prove interesting. 9 Sag 56. And I think she's out of bounds through the election. So on the 28th, there will be 8 exact major aspects, 6 of them by the moon. So that could be another very active day. 10/31, happy Halloween, happy All Saints Day. Ends with Mercury making a waning water trine to retrograde Neptune. And then on November 1st, which that's All Saints Day, right? There's a new moon,
Yeah,
9
it
Scorpio
is. Yeah.
35. Good way to start off November. On the 2nd, there will be 7 major and 1 quincunx aspects, and the moon will go out of bounds south. On the 3rd, which is Sunday, we go, forgot to add in there, we go off daylight savings time.
Hmm.
And Mars will go void of course for most of the day and then enter Leo in the evening. getting ready for his retrograde starting December 9th, I think it is. November 5th, election day, we
Mhm.
also have lunar standstill south.
What would that mean?
That means the moon will be as low across the southern horizon as it will get.
And that
Maximum
means,
southern declination.
what does that mean?
Well, it's when it's out of bounds, it doesn't have to behave the way it normally would when it's within the boundaries of the sun. And so coming on election day, the moon represents the people. It's a crapshoot. Anything, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And then on Sunday, November 10th, we have our monthly meetup, and we're going to be looking at the aftermath of the election. If there's an aftermath to look at, or if we still have power.
And the moon's going to be void of course on election day as well.
Yeah, but just for part of it. But yes, there's
That's
a whole
true.
lot of wild and crazy stuff going on election day, as is usually the case. So and I think that makes it it makes it more challenging to try to
Mm-hmm,
right guess what's going to happen.
mm-hmm.
Both candidates have positive aspects and negative aspects. I think the inauguration chart, when you look at the candidates with the inauguration chart, my gut feeling is that well, and I'm not sure how much of this is my own personal preference and prejudices, but it seems to give an advantage to Kamala Harris and the Democrats. We'll see. Because it may take that long before we actually get an answer. Okay. So this is a chart for noon today. What it shows is,
Oh, by the way, Mercury
yes.
just went out of void. It's 12:36, and you said that it
Oh,
would,
okay. All right, we're good to
so
go
we're
then.
Mercury's not in void anymore.
Yay. Thank you, Rita. Okay, so the inner wheel is the traditional tropical zodiac of 12, 30-degree signs. The outer wheel, the signs represent the actual size of the constellations. And as you can see, they're not 30 degrees each. And it also adjusts for precession. So you can kind of see how things are lining up right now.
When you say the size of the constellation, does that mean like from one star at the one extreme of the constellation to the other, like a measuring tape, from this star to that star? Do you count the space?
Kind of. The International Astronomical Union is the one that has the authority and responsibility for naming constellations and determining their size. So I got the information from their side. And it's actually, the size is based on the number of square degrees. So it's not just the width of the constellation, but it takes into effect the height as well. And that little white spot over there between Sagittarius and Scorpio is the 13th sign of Ophiuchus, the snake charmer.
So the outer ring has been adjusted for the
Yes.
Actual precession?
Yes.
Now, okay, so the International Astronomical Union determines the sizes of the constellations. Or what organization would be like officially, would produce that outer wheel?
It's programmed by the people that program SolarFire, because this is creative. I created this with using SolarFire.
Oh, okay. I've never actually been to that site. I should check it out.
Yeah, so it's reasonably, I would say reasonably accurate in the sense that of the 12 zodiacal constellations that are used, Virgo is the largest. I think Aquarius is no, not Aquarius. Yeah, I've got them coming up. So,
You know, I've had a Vedic reading by a Vedic astrologer. She pointed out I am a full-fledged Virgo. You see where the Virgo overlaps in the inner and outer circle?
mhm.
I would be in there. So sun-wise, I'm a Virgo in either system, but I have a different in tropical. I have Scorpio ascendant, whereas Gemini ascendant in the Vedic.
Yeah,
So what are you talking about, a 13th constellation there? Orpheus, is that?
Ophiuchus
Ophiuchus? Yeah, where did we get that?
right here.
Yeah.
Well, if you looked at the
Amazon.
night sky and you looked at a sky chart showing the constellations and showing the line of the sun through the zodiac,
Hmm.
through the constellations, you would see that at one point it crossed. There's this tall constellation, Ophiuchus, which is the snake charmer or snake handler, that his 1 foot actually extends down across the ecliptic. So the sun technically goes through that sign or that constellation during its journey. But because
But it's cutting
right,
off Virgo there.
no, that's Scorpio.
Oh, I'm sorry, cutting off Scorpio.
Yeah, between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Um, but because we don't work on a 13 month lunar calendar, we work on a 12-month solar calendar. We use 12 signs, not 13. So they don't use that. We're getting there.
Looks like the Virgo's the widest constellation.
Yes,
Amazing.
by bunch. Okay,
What does that mean?
it just means it's the largest it's the second largest of the 88 constellations and the largest of the 12 zodiacal constellations.
And does that mean more energy, more influence, more trouble?
There's a
Um,
lot of details to take care of.
It depends. Now, if you're doing constellational astrology, then it means that there's more Virgos in the world than any other sign.
Because it's more days for them to be born, right?
Yes.
Okay, Virgo's rule, yeah.
Yep. That means Virgos rule.
I used to
And
be
the rest
so
of them drool.
embarrassed being a Virgo because they would say, oh, you're so controlling, you're so this and you're so that. Now
Okay.
I take the bigger picture,
All right. So now let's address the elephant in the room. Precession of the equinox. So the Earth is tilted on its axis relative to the sun, and it doesn't spin straight. It wobbles like a top when it's kind of slowing down, but we never slow down and fall over. Yay. And the term precession is derived from the Latin praesidere, which is to proceed, to come before, or earlier. And basically, the stars viewed from Earth are seen to proceed from east to west daily due to the Earth's diurnal motion or rotation, and yearly due to the Earth's revolution around the sun. But at the same time, the stars can be observed to anticipate slightly such motion at the rate of approximately 50 arc seconds per year, meaning it's a combination of our rotation on our axis, our orbit around the sun, and the sun's orbit around the galaxy that causes the precession of the zodiac, which is basically this. They seem to go backwards. The apparent position of the sun relative to the backdrop of the stars at some seasonally fixed time slowly regresses a full 360 degrees through all 12 traditional constellations of the zodiac at the rate of about 50.3 seconds of arc per year, or 1 degree every 71.6 years. At the present rate, the precession corresponds to a period of around 25,772 years. So that over that course of that not quite 26,000 years, all 12 signs will at one time or another be one of the equinoxes and one of the solstices and so on. Now, that would be significant if astrological signs were based on the constellations. But astrological signs are not based on constellations, and they haven't been for quite some time. Now, the Vedics use do precess the equinoxes in Vedic astrology. And it may help them when it comes to the more determinative or fatalistic approach they take to astrology and their predictions.
What do
Excuse
you mean
me.
by fatalistic? I've heard that term.
Well, it's determinative.
Is it like
It's event
predictive?
based.
Deadly.
Yes, when they're predicting events, they're more apt to predict when something, how something will impact a person.
Right, that's a characteristic of Vedic astrology. Yeah, it's
Right. As opposed to
predictive.
yeah, Western tropical tends to take a more psychological
Psychological.
approach, holistic, non-predictive approach. It's it is tropical astrology is archetypally predictive, not concretely predictive.
I don't think you've moved your screen, Jim.
Oh, are we still looking at the elephant in the room?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I haven't moved my screen. You're good.
Here's the point. Wouldn't the ancients, though, be more concerned about predictive? Like, is it going to be a
Yes.
good crop? Is there going to be rain? Stuff
Right.
like that.
They were. Mhm.
So that would be
Yeah.
the reason why Vedic, going back thousands of years, would be predominantly predictive.
Yeah, I know they claim it's that old, but there's questions as to whether or not it really is that old. They're using the Vedas as a basis, but they are actually the actual astrology itself tends to have its origin with the Greeks in terms of the charts and such that they use. They got it. It seems like they got it when Alexander was busy trying to conquer the world.
2160.
Because you can, if you look back at even the ancient, prior to the Greek astrologers, back to the time of, it was about Babylonians that came up with the idea of a circle being 360 degrees and divided it into 12 equal parts.
Hmm.
And prior to that, I mean, the ancient Egyptians didn't have a chart that we would recognize as such, yet they had their astronomers and astrology, which were the same thing, observed the celestial phenomenons and created the rules that they had for predicting the effect that certain celestial events might have for the pharaoh and the country. So constellation is an area of the celestial sphere, night sky, which a group of visible stars forms a perceived pattern or outline, typically representing an animal, mythological subject, or inanimate object. In astronomy and navigation, the celestial sphere is an abstract that has an arbitrarily large radius and concentric to Earth. You can conceive it as being, like there's a giant dome and something's projecting all these little lights up there. Which may be centered on the Earth or the observer. If it's centered on the observer, then we only see what we can see from horizon to horizon. When you look at it from an Earth base, then it's a small globe within a globe, unless you're a flat earther. The origin of the constellations. Some of you may not like this, but let's say, here we go. Genesis chapter 1. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years.
Blasphemy.
So it's right there in the good book, you evangelicals and doubters.
Did they
Anybody who
actually
doubts.
say signs, seasons, days and years? They actually said it like that?
Yep.
Yes. Well, now
Okay.
this is, I'm
They
not
did.
sure how the new books say it, but this is from the King James Version.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, King James has been all.
I'm sure they probably tried to word it somewhat different, which is interesting because as the Bible evolved with the Catholics, at one point, I guess they did try to take a lot of the references to divination out of the good book, but they wouldn't get them all out because it would have kind of messed up everything. Verse 16, and God made two great lights, the greater to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also, and God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. So it's like, it's right there in the good book. If you want to take that approach, you
Must
can be
be
very
true.
biblical about it.
Mhm.
God created all of this for us to use as signs to interpret. And if you think about it, I mean, when you go, any church has a preacher, priest, whatever they have, that's basically what they learn to do, is to interpret God's signs. But my humble opinion. Okay, so for thousands of years, people have gazed at the night sky and wonder. Over time, different cultures saw different creatures and things formed by the brightest stars in the night sky. These became part of their mythology and history. One of the earliest is the Egyptian Dendera zodiac, which is actually on the ceiling of a tomb. Babylonians, those images were made part of their written record, and these were later refined by ancient Greeks, creating what has become the 12 zodiacal constellations. In the years since the ancient Greeks, the 48 constellations that were identified, as noted by Ptolemy, have expanded to become 88 accepted astronomical constellations as identified by the International Astronomical Union. Now, if you go to different parts of the world, different cultures may still all have different names or different constellations that they refer to. But those are, there's 88 that's accepted. The first constellations go back to prehistory. People use them to relate stories of their beliefs, experiences, creation, and mythology. Different cultures and countries invented their own constellations, some of which lasted into the early 20th century before today's constellations were internationally recognized. Of course, not today. You've got countries that didn't exist back in the early 20th century when the IAU was created. So some of these people, they haven't necessarily, they didn't have any input into these constellations. Pareidolia. It's a phenomenon wherein people perceive likenesses of random images such as faces, animals, or objects on clouds, rock formations, and in the night sky. It's not a clinical diagnosis, nor is it a disorder. The brain has a tendency to assign meaning wherever it can. So if you look at something and you think you see the face of somebody or something else, that's natural. It's the brain trying to create meaning out of randomness.
How do you pronounce that word?
Pareidolia.
Pareidolia. Interesting. Okay.
That's why they use the Rorschach.
Yeah. Exactly. Good old ink blot test. What do you see in this blot of ink?
Yeah, but how many times, especially as a child, you would lay down and make stories of the clouds, right?
Yep. You look up there, you can see things. What was it? Oh God, what was that? Oh, where was it? Was it one of there's photographs, I think from 9/11, where one of the clouds appeared to have the picture of a demon in it. Form a demon of some sort, I think it was. Okay, here we go. the 12 constellations. Doesn't look much like a ram, does it?
No, no, not there.
But hey, yeah. And you can find a lot of different images for the different constellations, and some of them will emphasize more stars than others, so on. This is Aries, represented by the ram. Since late Babylonian times, and before that, stars of Aries formed a farmhand. Different cultures have incorporated the stars of Aries into different constellations, including twin inspectors in China and a porpoise in the Marshall Islands. The Greeks related Aries to the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece. Ancient Greek god of war was Ares, A-R-E-S, who was different from Mars, the Roman god of war, in that Ares was about individual prowess, not focused on conquering and acquiring territory, as Mars was. So I think one of the big differences, I think, between ancient Greece and Rome is that the Romans' god of war was Mars, which we assigned to the red planet. And in their mind, it was about conquest. Rome was about conquest. They wanted to conquer the world. And they came pretty close. They conquered pretty much all of the Mediterranean. They got over to England and conquered England. They were stopped by the
It counts.
wild tribes of Scotland.
Right.
You're talking about the
Uh,
Romans now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Greeks, if you look at the Greek history, they never really seemed to be that interested in conquering the world. I mean, they would fight with each other. They would form alliances,
But they
but
would stay
conquest
around
and
that Mediterranean area.
yeah. So they really weren't. They expanded, they explored, they traded, they established places outside of the Greek islands, but they really weren't interested in trying to conquer the world. And it wasn't until Alexander of Macedonia came along, quickly conquered the Greek city-states, and took off trying to conquer the world. He went east and into Africa, conquering Egypt, conquered Persia, pretty much most of the Middle East and the East up until he got to India and Afghanistan, and that's where he kind of ran into a brick wall.
Mhm.
So Aries is 11th in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising only 441 square degrees. The brightest stars are Hamal and Sheraton. And what's interesting is when we talk about bright stars, many of them are not actually part of the 12 zodiac constellations. So, Taurus, which is Latin for bull, is one of the oldest constellations, dating back to the early Bronze Age. Mark the location of the sun during the spring equinox. It's important to the agricultural calendar, influence various bull figures in the mythologies of ancient Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. And Taurus is the only constellation crossed by all three of the galactic equator, the celestial equator, and the ecliptic.
Mhm.
Those are the three great circles. We primarily focus on the celestial equator, the equinox, and the ecliptic. Taurus is 6th in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising 797 square degrees. The brightest stars are Aldebaran, Elnath, and Alcyone. Gemini. In Greek mythology, Gemini was associated with the mythic Castor and Pollux, children of Leda and Argonauts, both. Pollux was the son of Zeus, who seduced Leda, while Castor was the son of Tyndareus, king of Sparta and Leda's husband. So it's one of these cases where you have twins born but sired by different fathers. even then they knew that this could happen. Okay. How many of you remember reading about the woman, this is several years ago, pre-pandemic, who had twins? One was actually Caucasian and one was African American. And they were like a bit complex, but yes, it is possible. And it does happen. It's rare, but it happens. Castor and Pollux were also were mythologically associated with Saint Elmo's fire in their role as protectors of sailors. When Castor died, because he was mortal, Pollux begged his father Zeus to give Castor immortality, and he did by uniting them together in the heavens. Gemini is eighth in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising 514 square degrees. The brightest stars are Castor and Pollux.
The other part of it is that Castor and Pollux were divided and they spent half of the year in their heaven and then half of the world on half of their year on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as you start to look at it, you'll find that there's a number of different mythologies, often with the different signs. So Cancer is the dimmest of the zodiacal constellations, having only 2 stars above the 4th magnitude. Now, when we're talking magnitudes, lower numbers are better, are brighter. Lower is brighter. In Greek mythology, Cancer is identified with the crab that appeared while Heracles fought the many-headed Lernaean Hydra. Heracles slew the crab after it bit him in the foot. Afterwards, the goddess Hera, an enemy of Heracles, placed the crab among the stars. Cancer is 9th in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising 506 square degrees. Its brightest stars are Altarf and Delta Cancri. So it's like, who ever heard of them? Leo. In mythology, Leo was identified as a Nemean lion, which was killed by Heracles during the first of his 12 labors. The Nemean lion would take women as hostages to its lair in a cave, luring warriors from nearby towns to save the damsels in distress, much to their misfortune. Because the lion's body was impervious to their weapons. Zeus commemorated this labor by placing the lion in the sky. The star Wolf 359, or Cn Leonis, one of the nearest stars to Earth at 7.8 million light years away, is in Leo. Leo is 3rd in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising 947 square degrees. The brightest stars are Regulus, Denebola, and Zosma. Here we are, Virgo. Mythology, part of this, yeah, in ancient mythology, part of this constellation was also known as the furrow, representing the goddess Shala and her ear of grain. One star in this constellation, Spica, retains this tradition as it is Latin for ear of grain, one of the major products of the Mesopotamian furrow. For this reason, the constellation became associated with fertility. Early Greek astronomy associated the Babylonian constellation with their goddess of wheat, agriculture, and autumn, Demeter, while the Romans associated it with their goddess Ceres. Alternatively, the constellation was sometimes identified as the virgin goddess Astraea, holding the scales of justice in her hand that now are separated as the constellation Libra or Libra. Because of the presence of a galaxy cluster, consequently called the Virgo cluster, this constellation is especially rich in galaxies. It's the largest of the constellations of the zodiac and 2nd largest of all 88 constellations, comprising 1,294 square degrees. Brightest stars are Spica, Porrima, and Dindymatrix.
You know what this
Libra or
doesn't-
Libra
You know what
Pardon?
this doesn't show is sometimes they'll impose the full figure on the stars so you can see how they might have gotten the image. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about using those, but decided not to.
Oh, these are good. I just not used to seeing just the, the
Yeah.
planet.
Libra is known in Babylonian astronomy as Mul Zibanu, the scales or balance, and alternatively as the claws of the scorpion. So Libra is unique in this, in that it was at different times and known as either scales of justice or scales of balance, but also as the claws of the scorpion. The
That's
scales
the
were
punishment.
Hmm?
For the balance.
yes. So now we think of it as the symbol is the balance. It's the only inanimate object of the 12 zodiacal constellations. They were held sacred to the sun god Shamash, was also the patron of truth and justice. It was also seen as the scorpion's claws in ancient Greece. In ancient Egypt, the three brightest stars of Libra formed a constellation that was viewed as a boat. It only became a constellation in ancient Rome when it began to represent the scales held by Astrea, the goddess of justice, associated with Virgo in the Greek mythology. It's seventh in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising 538 square degrees. The brightest stars are Zuban el Ganubi and Zuban Eshkamali. And
That's a
see that,
mouthful.
isn't it, though? Like,
You
more
did
than a
good,
tongue
Jim.
twister.
Yeah, good pronunciation, Jim. Thank
Yeah.
I make it up as I go along.
you.
And we can't
Practice.
correct you because we have no idea.
Well,
That's right.
I was
Scorpio.
gonna say- yeah. Okay. I was going to say one more thing about the claws of justice and the claws of Scorpio is that,
Hmm.
Putin is a Libra, and I think he's a good example of the cruelty and push of the claws of Scorpio. Just a passing thought.
Who is? Who is?
Vladimir Putin,
Oh.
Putin.
Ronnie's buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Donnie's good buddy, Vlad. Okay. All right. It was known as the Scorpio. In Greek mythology, according to one version, Orion boasted to the goddess Artemis and her mother Leto that he would kill every animal on Earth. Artemis and Leto sent a scorpion to kill Orion. Their battle caught the attention of Zeus, who raised both combatants to the sky to serve as a reminder for mortals, curb their excessive pride. Now Orion hunts every winter, but flees every summer when the scorpion comes. Due to its location straddling the Milky Way, this constellation contains many deep sky objects, such as the open clusters Messier 6, known as the Butterfly Cluster, and Messier 7, known as the Ptolemy Cluster. Scorpio is the 10th in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising 497 square degrees. Brightest stars are Antares, Akrab, and Shuba. So and I'm sticking to it. Sagittarius is Latin for archer. The center of the Milky Way galaxy is densest near Sagittarius, as this is where the center is, near 27 Sagittarius, home of our supermassive black hole Sag A. Sagittarius is home to many star clusters and nebula. Also located here is the point known as the Great Attractor, which is about 14 Sagittarius. And as far as I know, they still don't know what it is, but it appears as if our galaxy, the Milky Way, the Virgo cluster, which is a cluster of galaxies that we're part of, plus other neighboring galaxies and clusters, all seem to be pulled in that direction or heading in that direction. So because they don't know what's going on, but everything seems to be going that way, they've named this point the Great Attractor. Sounds like could make a song, right? Platters could do that one. Oh, yes, I'm the Great Attractor. The Babylonians identified Sagittarius as the god Nergal, a centaur-like creature firing an arrow from a bow. In Greek mythology, Sagittarius is usually identified as a centaur, half human, half horse. Some identify Sagittarius as a centaur Chiron, while others say he is the constellation Centaurus. The arrow of the archer is pointed at Antares, the heart of the Scorpio, poised to fire should Scorpio ever attack Hercules. I misspelled that. I got to fix that. Sagittarius is the fifth in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising 867 square degrees. The brightest stars are Cos Australis and Nunci and Ascella, none of which are well known. Capricornus is Latin for the horned goat and is one of the faintest constellations. But despite its faintness, the constellation Capricornus has one of the oldest mythological associations, having been consistently represented as a hybrid of a goat and a fish since the Middle Bronze Age, which was 2100 to 1550 BCE, when the Babylonians used the goatfish as a symbol of their god E. In Greek mythology, the constellation is sometimes identified as Almalthea, the goat that suckled the infant Zeus after his mother Rhea saved him from being devoured by his father Cronus. Solar apex, the apparent direction of the sun, is 7 Capricorn. That's the point at which the sun appears to be taking us. And, the solar system appears to be going that way. So if you got something at 7 or around 7 Capricorn, then congratulations, you're part of the solar apex. Capricorn is the smallest in size of the constellations, comprising just 414 square degrees. The brightest stars are Deneb Algedi, and Dabi.
Looks like a diaper to me.
I was thinking the same kind of thing, a diaper, a mask, a face mask.
Interesting.
Pointy
It's
hat.
interesting. You said something. It's the dimmest or the faintest, and that's the dark of winter. Yeah.
Yeah. Aquarius, Latin for water carrier, identified as the Great One in the Babylonian star catalogs and represents the god A, who is commonly depicted holding an overflowing vase, or vase if you prefer. The name in the Hindu zodiac is Kumbha, water pitcher, which is interesting that they would come up with a very similar theme of it. In Greek mythology, it is sometimes identified with beautiful Ganymede, a youth and the son of Trojan king Tros, who was taken to Mount Olympus by Zeus to act as cupbearer to the gods, and some say as other things. Aquarius is the second largest in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising 980 square degrees. Spence, while large, it has no particularly bright stars. Brightest are Sad al-Sud and Sad al-Malik. You'll notice some of these have Arabic sounding names, and that's because they are.
The thing I heard on Aquarius is the water bearer, the sun, when that flood we were talking about earlier, the sun is in Leo in the summer, but the opposite sign is what you see at night, and that's the Aquarius constellation, and it has been throughout time with the processions, but that's why they have the guy with the water where the Aquarius is equal. It's like everybody's banks flood in the Nile, so everybody gets new nutrients and grow crops, and it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It's like the whole Nile banks flood no matter where you lived. So that's a little story I remember from.
Yeah, I believe also that Aquarius is in that part of the sky where they call the sea, because there are several aquatic themed constellations around it.
And water is life, or now they're sailing. Alien
Yes.
magic, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Interesting molecule. Yeah.
And last but not least, we have Pisces. It originates from some composition of the Babylonian constellation Sinutu, the Great Swallow, in current Western Pisces, and Nutatum, the Lady of the Heaven, at the place of the northern fish. So it's basically, it's the two fish. And in Greek mythology, according to Hyginus, Aphrodite and Eros, while visiting Syria, fled the monster Typhon by leaping into the Euphrates River and transforming into fishes. The Roman variant of the story has Venus and Cupid carried away from this danger on the backs of two fishes, porpoises in some cases. Pisces is the fourth in size of the constellations of the zodiac, comprising 889 square degrees. While large in size, it has only two stars brighter than magnitude 4. They are Al-Resha and Fumal Samah. Any questions about the constellations?
I have a couple of comments.
Yes, sir.
I think
You-
that everyone forgets that if it weren't for Aquarius and the person that brings rain and electricity, we wouldn't be alive at all, because Pisces is all salt water. Show me a place where you have a fish. You could find a fish in fresh water, but the whole ocean is salt water. And I know it sounds crazy, but also it's a water. So, I mean, it's this air sign, but it brings water. So many people that talk to me think it's water sign, but I say, no, you got to realize that it's an air sign, because we have the air is what brings us the fresh water. If it weren't for the air and the Aquarius ability to bring that air up to a point that we get rain. Does anyone else find that confusing? Am I the only lunatic in the room? I don't know. I kind of worry
Interesting
about
point.
that. But on the other hand, it is a thought to think about.
Yeah.
If you are a lunatic, you're one of my favorite lunatics, Spencer. So more power to
There
you.
you go. More power to you.
There's 12 cell salts, and the Aquarius one is sodium chloride, table salt, or sea salt. So that might be a transitional thing or whatever, as far as coordinating with the ocean and salt. It adds
Yeah.
salt. Yeah. Did that make any
It's
sense?
kind of an interesting idea, I really do, thinking of it as providing fresh water, because of course you wouldn't have gone down to the ocean to collect water with a jug. You would have gone to a well or a river.
Yeah.
So I think it makes a
Right.
lot of sense. And I
Right.
think the idea that Aquarius provides sustenance. I mean, okay, it's an air sign. I mean, it is more sustenance through ideas or through sharing or through collective, but we can't be sustained,
Yeah.
as a person without ideas, I think, ultimately.
Yeah.
And we might not see but the water, the Pisces is the vapor version of water, and it, evaporates the ocean, and then precipitation, it gets us back to fresh. So it's kind of
Well,
cycle.
Pisces supplies the whole way that the air gets to the water. It's after it gets to the water that becomes really interesting. Maybe that's the way we can excuse the way we work at Pisces, is that because it's a water sign that gives up fresh air through the air, that we could combine them in some way. When we went through the whole thing about the creation of the earth through the examples in the book of Genesis, God just throws it out there. We have water. He doesn't seem to, then the animals came. I don't know. I just find that an easy conundrum. And I want to ask one more question about Pisces. I'm very alarmed that the Pisces has two fish, but one is going up and one is going down. And I always look at it, that's kind of a question of compulsion. One is going up high to a point where it gets to too much ecstasy, and the other goes down to deep for death, but if it goes down too far, then it gets depressed. So I think I'm not saying that the whole thing, but I'm just saying it's a way of kind of simplifying this situation, because on one hand, Pisces does give us a whole group of things in terms of compulsions and addictions, but on the other hand, the idea of seeking the light and seeking death is also a part of the Pisces conundrum.
I've got a really simple explanation. It's the AI. It says the symbol for the zodiac sign Pisces is two fish swimming in opposite directions, representing the constant struggle between reality and fantasy that Pisces experience.
That's
Like
interesting.
that's like wow, and this is AI.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it doesn't have my definition, so
Yeah. Oh, it probably does. But yeah, I think it's a good point. The other thing going back to Aquarius is that in the summer when it's hot, um, in some areas that's when you get the rains, from coming from the night sky of Aquarius.
Is Pisces ruled by
Aquarius,
Neptune? Sorry to interrupt.
Mhm.
Jupiter, Neptune.
But well,
Well,
then
they're-
also with in some areas when the Aquarius comes in end of January and February, that's can be when the rains come back or the snow turns to
Right.
rain. So yeah, it is interesting that Aquarius, the water bearer, is actually considered a fixed air sign. It's a little strange. Then again, I find our definition of Uranus strange as well because he doesn't really sound much like the ancient Uranus Greek god. Well, that's just me.
I got another thing is this opposite directions. If you look at the constellation, one's going vertical and one's horizontal, and it was explained to me another way to think of it is the earth and the above. And again, how the water goes to vapor we were talking about earlier, but it's like here we are on earth, the grounding horizontal line, and then there's the heavens above that we can't touch. You always think of Neptune, Pisces, it's like you can't touch it in many ways, but it's there, or you can't even see it, but it's
Yeah.
Let me ask a question. Aren't we in the age of Pisces right now?
yes.
Yeah.
And so for
We're
the
considered
last,
to be the Piscean age. Yeah.
right, and so it was the birth of religion. All the religions were born during this period, wasn't it? Was it mine?
Well,
Maybe not born, but they were
actually,
powerful.
Christianity and Islam have come during this time. Judaism, Buddhism, some of the others predate age of Pisces.
Yeah, the Jewish or Hebrew calendar and the Chinese calendar are they're in the 5,000s of
Yeah.
years.
Well,
Yeah.
what happened in the Pisces age that it became a one god
Um,
rather than multiple gods?
Well,
mm,
don't the Jewish people believe only in one God?
Yeah,
That predated it.
Yeah, I think they do.
right.
No,
Yeah.
they're
I think the
part of it.
Buddhists have the idea that all the gods are under sort of one larger
A
idea.
top
Mhm.
god.
Yeah, and the Celtic and
So-
whatever. Yeah, the Jews.
Yeah,
There's
and the
one.
Catholics have God, and then they have all their saints and angels under them. So,
Mhm.
it's not that different from a hierarchy of gods with
Well,
one
I've been
supreme
reading
God.
this interesting book on the precession. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it. It's called The Signs of the Times by Robert Fitzgerald. And he explains how time and history follow an astrological structure.
Mhm.
So, for instance, Cancer, the age of Cancer was when we had the invention of agriculture around the world. And then he goes through each one. And so it's very interesting. Every age is about 2,000, 2,100 years, something like that.
Right.
Well, that's
Good.
where we had, when you
Yeah.
start in the 60s, that was the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
Right.
We all were singing that, and it was all about bringing in this new age, which wouldn't come quite in until about 2000 and something.
Yeah.
Right.
Around 2,300 or something, yes.
And
Yeah.
it's supposed to be
Well, this
about,
is,
yeah,
this is the transition period because he said the actual age of Pisces comes in about 2160.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that also the two constellations, Aquarius and Pisces, overlap. So that's how I kind of look at it as another factor. Physically, they overlap. And also the
Right.
orb, within orb, the
No.
Well,
in
that's
the
because, yeah, there's always an overlap when you have transition.
right.
Okay.
And
Now,
in
here's
the ephemeris, I'll just add this to the SVP, it shows 4 Pisces now. So we're within
Mhm.
5 degrees, but that's a slow countdown. You know, your typical ephemeris down on the right corner. So that's, if you want to go technically age of Aquarius, that's one way to measure it. Sorry,
Mhm.
Jen.
I have an interesting one for you. Here's the guy that says that the fact that we had, when is the date of this? Not that far, December 22nd, Jupiter and Saturn have an eclipse or an event that both Jupiter and Saturn are at 0, Aquarius. Now think about that. And that might also be a clue of a transition period. I'm not saying it has to be that way, but
No, that's
Right.
yes, that's what I talked about in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
called the vortex, the Aries vortex.
uh-huh.
And it's the Aries vortex is also has Pluto and Uranus in trine or in sextile to that 0 point at the same time, which
Uh,
apparently has never happened before.
okay. Now, here's in some ways you're all making my point. And the the point of this is to help you understand the distinction between a constellation and an astrological
Their sign.
sign.
Yes, of course.
Okay. They aren't the same. They don't cover the same areas. I mean, in some cases they overlap, um, but the constellations are different sizes. So when we're talking about the
Right.
age of Aquarius, we're talking about when by tropic, by precession
Precession,
using the
right.
astrological signs,
Right.
the spring equinox will move from Pisces into Aquarius. It goes
Right.
from 0 Pisces to to 29, 59, 59 Aquarius.
No,
Right.
isn't it the point of the point of the Earth is pointing towards the constellation, not the sign, constellation.
Hmm. No,
No,
no, because we don't point towards, we point towards the constellations every year as we go around the sun.
It
Yeah.
still makes a very powerful thing to think about in
Well,
terms of however we approach this, even with our
Well, I think the main thing is the constellations are interesting, and they were the precursors to the signs,
uh,
but they are not the signs.
no, but
And
that's what
when
he
we're talking
bases
about,
in this what he bases this book on is the astrological constellations lie in a circle around the Earth.
right, okay, but he's actually talking about the signs, not the constellations.
Okay, it sounded to me
If
like
he's
it was
using
a
the term
constellation.
constellations, he's misusing it because, like I pointed out, there's a big difference in the size of the constellations relative
Right.
to the signs. So, yeah, uh, when would spring equinox be 29, 59, 59 of Aquarius? Or would it move from the constellation of Pisces into the constellation of Aquarius? Um,
I have a
because
question about that. We
Mhm.
have a 25,000 year slope, I think, around the, how
Yes,
does that only work through constellations, I guess, because it talks about the moon.
no,
No?
no, it's that cycle is based on the 12, it's based on the 12 astrological signs, 30 degrees each,
Uh,
not based on the constellations.
Oh,
I mean, technically, yes. I mean, if you're looking at it astronomically, yes, it's going through the constellations, but the constellations and the signs are different things.
So, Jim, would you
So,
say that the constellations are the basis for the signs in both the tropical and Vedic systems, and
oh yeah,
that the signs of both systems embody the mythological or the meaning of the constellations?
uh, yes,
Okay,
not
then
perhaps.
they're just out of sync. That first chart that you put up, the outer ring showing the constellations with the precession factored in. If you look at the first point of Aries, right, that would be at the bottom where, the point between Aries and Pisces. That's the first point. That's 0 degrees Aries, right? If you look at the
Yes.
outer ring, it's in the constellation of Pisces,
Yep.
right? So, like on the first day of spring, you look up and you would say, oh, hey, there's Pisces over there. So it's just that the constellations have moved ahead. The zodiac constellations have moved. The zodiac signs have just moved ahead. I think 24 degrees from the constellations, but the meanings are still based
Yeah,
on
except okay,
the mythology and the meanings of the
it's but
constellation.
you okay,
And
Mike,
the
you can't
elements
talk
too.
in okay, Mike, you cannot talk in terms of degrees when you're talking about the constellations because the constellations are entirely different because they're not 30 degrees.
No, I'm not talking about degrees with constellations. I'm just referring to your original chart where the first point of
Right.
Aries
Mhm.
is in the purple arc
Right.
of
It's right here.
Pisces.
It's showing it here. I noticed that in looking at this, there is some actual discrepancies within this outer ring in terms of the way it displays, but because if you look at Aquarius, it's not the second largest. But um, the problem when we talk about precession of the equinox, um, it's involves this 25,000 year cycle of the Earth orbit. But when we try to visualize it as a chart, we're doing everything based upon uh, two circles of 12 signs, 30 degrees each.
This might illustrate the point. Hypothetically, in about 13,000 years, you're going to see the Pisces sitting on top of Libra. There'll be 180 degree, discrepancy between the zodiac signs versus where the constellations are.
Yeah.
So very interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, we're in that transition period between the Aquarius and the Pisces.
Right. And that's based on using the 30-degree astrological signs, not the constellations.
Okay.
and the houses fit into this as,
Another way to divide the 360-degree circle.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
See,
the
in the Vedic system, they use whole signs, whole house sign. They use whole houses so that, the first house is Aries and the second house, I mean, so everything is 30 degrees and it's a sign and a house match up. In sidereal astrology, they do use, in some cases, different house systems, just like we do in tropical astrology.
yeah.
Okay. Ding dong, ding dong. All right. This is just a quick summary for the 12 signs.
I apologize.
And it's
My electricity blinked in my house and I lost you guys for a few minutes.
Yeah, the houses, well, the use of houses is just another way of dividing up the chart into 12 parts. Originally, there was no distinction, there were no house systems. It was a whole house system. So the 12 houses were 30 degrees and the 12 signs were 30 degrees. When we started with what we think of as the beginning of astrology, circular charts are a more recent creation, because if you're looking back at the medieval and earlier periods, if you see a chart, for the most part, you'll see something that's a square, just like Vedic charts are now. They still are square or rectangular.
Hmm.
And so we know of, Aries is about self-assertion and initiative. In the red, it tells you that, in Rex Bill's book of rulership, the rulership book, he devotes about 3.5 pages to things ruled by Aries, starting with one's ability to zeal, and Taurus, harmony, endurance, stubborn. It rules actors, actresses to yellow. Gemini it's 5 pages of Gemini from accounts to Zephyrs. And maybe that's because it's twins and they need more room. I don't know. But you can see even Virgo's 5 pages, abdomens to yellow green.
Because Virgos need 5 pages.
Yeah, we could even do more than that.
We could.
Yes, we could. So we have, so everything is,
Hmm.
those of you who were here last month when we did the houses, I did something similar with the 12 houses. And that's why I decided to do this with the 12 signs.
Hmm.
It's like Scorpio, adenoids to Worthing, England. Okay, Sagittarius runs from abundance to Yugoslavia, which doesn't exist anymore.
Hmm.
Pisces, mystical, sensitive, procrastinate. 4 pages from abbeys to X-ray processing rooms. However, X-rays are under Aquarius, as is Abyssinia, which is now Ethiopia again.
So when was this rulership book made? Early?
He published it, I don't know, probably 70s.
Okay.
There is a more, yeah, if you really want to, if you're really into astrology and you want to have something to guide you in terms of what planet, sign, or house governs a particular thing, I would recommend finding a copy of Rex Bill's rulership book, because he breaks it down by planets. He lists everything alphabetically. Then he lists everything by planets, and under each planet, it's listed alphabetically. He does each of the 12 signs, and he does each of the 12 houses. So
All
you can find,
cross-reference,
it's all cross-reference, so that when you look at it, if you find it in the alphabetical listing after the word, it'll show you the symbols for the planet, house, sign that might rule it. The evolution of astrology. Here we go. Pre-Greek Hellenistic astrology focused on the fixed stars and other phenomenon more so than the planets and constellations or signs. The 2 key features were heliacal rising and herons. The heliacal rising of a star or planet occurs annually when it first becomes visible above the eastern horizon at dawn, just before sunrise, thus becoming the morning star, and after a complete orbit of the Earth around the sun. Historically, the most important such rising is that of Sirius, which was an important feature of the Egyptian calendar and astronomical development. The rising of Sirius foretold of the flooding of the Nile. The rising of the Pleiades heralded the start of the ancient Greek sailing season, using celestial navigation as well as the farming season. Now, due to the daily rotation of the Earth, stars and planets will rise, culminate, set, and be on the nadir. That's the MC, no, the AC.
Mhm.
Yeah. If at any stage a star is on one of the four angles, while at the same time a planet is also on any of these four places, then the star is linked to the planet via what is called a parin. So that was their focus. It wasn't about, oh, Mars is squaring Jupiter. Yeah, and in the sign of whatever. They were actually, and it wasn't really so focused on the constellations as it was on the actual stars themselves that make up the constellations. Because the connection was between the star, whether what the star was doing right before sunrise, for example, or if the star was making a connection with a planet. And that's something that modern astrology does not consider, whether you're talking about tropical, sidereal, or Vedic. That isn't part of their equation at all, really. The Vedic astrology does have what they call the 27 lunar mansions, which are kind of based on a series of 27 stars around the zodiac. But the reality is they basically have taken the 360 degrees and divided it into 27 equal parts, 13 degrees and 20 minutes of arc. So here's where I blame it on the Romans. So the Babylonians were the first to create the 360-degree circle and then divide it into 12 segments for signs. This was then adopted by the Greeks, most notably Ptolemy. The rise of the Roman Empire and the Julian calendar, along with Ptolemy, led to the use of 12 equal signs of 30 degrees and the gradual movement away from the fixed stars, because it was based on the solar calendar, because our year is solar in nature. Modern tropical Western astrology, as well as sidereal and Vedic, all based their charts on 12 signs of 30 degrees each, and evolved from Hellenistic and then medieval astrology. Tropical astrology is solar-based, utilizing the Gregorian calendar, which was created in the early 1580s. Actually, it was implemented, I think, October of 1582, at the direction of Pope Gregory XIII, and has been adopted by most countries, though the British Empire didn't adopt it until around the 1750s. So that's where it gets tricky when you start looking at America and you going back prior to the revolution. Because what happened was there was one year where in September they just dropped, I think, 15 or 16 days. And you went from like September 15th to October 1st. Because that's how out of sync the Julian calendar was. So the movement of the sun through the four seasons: spring equinox, 0 Aries; summer solstice, 0 Cancer; fall equinox, 0 Libra; and winter solstice, 0 Capricorn, are based on the calendar. That's when the sun crosses the ecliptic or reaches its highest and lowest points in the sky. There are different methods for calculating precession in sidereal and Vedic astrology, and thus you have the question of, well, which is correct, because it can be off. So depending on which one you use, you're going to be off a little bit. And that since they're both based on 30-degree signs, it could move something from one sign to the next previous.
We can blame a lot of things on the Romans.
Yeah. Right. I mean, you think about it, I mean, Latin was the
Predominant
Latin was
language.
the language. Greek was the writing, more or less. Much was written in Greek. Everything was translated from like the Hebrew to the Greek and then to something else. Latin was the line of used for communication, politics. Greek used for philosophy, knowledge, science.
And the problem with that is that it has kind of that telephone problem. When you go from one culture, they tend to change it a little bit. For instance, in ancient Hebrew, if you look at the 10 Commandments, one of them was, "Thou shalt not murder." I always wondered about that when I was first going to a Methodist church, because they would talk about thou shalt not kill. And that when you look in the Old Testament, God was always sending them out to kill off these, people there.
Yeah.
But if you have it as murder, then it's much more personal.
And it's they're all put like they say, go over there and take them with the sword. That can and you can remember the thing. In wars now we have an impersonal way of killing people.
Right.
You have to have a gun or a bomb or a mine. Back in those days, if you have a fight, you got to go knife the other
Mhm.
people. Think of that.
Yeah, it was mano
Lord
a mano.
Byron. Yeah.
Mhm.
I got a
Yeah.
quick question on about the calculating the precession. Is it more different methods or different techniques? And do you use an absolute point, like when the Babylonians first, when they first pointed out this is 0 degrees Aries? Did they start as like the absolute point, or do you start in the present and calculate
this-
backwards?
Um,
This book I
yeah.
just showed you, the Signs of the Times, he explains all of that. So you know exactly, he even has a table of the ages and when they happened. So like the Aries age, modernly was 1800 to 815. That's the era. He divides it into the big
Ages are
ones,
about 2,000 years.
right? 2000 years.
What your thoughts, Jim?
Years,
So
right?
he actually
Anyway,
in his book.
he gives you tables in the book so you can understand the mathematics. I can't explain mathematics because I'm not good at that.
If
So
you
it
want
But he
sounds like
explains the whole precession. I found it fascinating because
Hmm.
he makes a good case of explaining all the different eras of man.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
Aries era being the one of conquering, of wars,
Mhm.
fights for territory, etc.
Yeah.
And then Taurus came along, and the Cancer is the food growth, and so on. He just keeps going on and explains each age, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, if you think in terms of, okay, so the Piscean age began sometime around the birth of Christ, somewhere in that vicinity, around 0 AD.
Yeah, it's the fish,
Mhm.
Christ and the fish.
The age of Aries would have been, like 2100 years prior to that. From that point back, 2100 years. And that was when um, civilization really took hold and large city-states and empires started to be built, and war became more a way of life, and we became very patriarchal.
Right.
When you go back another 2,000 years, from 2100 to 4200 BC, you're in the age of Taurus.
I believe that was a matriarchal age, wasn't it?
Yes, now you're getting into more of a matriarchy.
You're getting into the goddess and the
Right,
wheat
right.
fields and mhm.
And then you go back another 2100 years, you're doing, Gemini and so on. And so you can see how,
That was the beginning of writing
yeah.
and communication.
So it is very interesting. Yes, there is that overlap of that signs, using the 30-degree signs as a symbolically, rather than trying to equate things to the actual constellations. Because I mean, from a practical Earth-based standpoint, we go through the 12 zodiacal constellations every year, just as we go through the 12 astrological signs every year. And to try then to line up things with the constellations would just have been a little bit more difficult and perhaps confusing. With the exception of February, I don't know why we created the calendar the way they did, cheating February out of a couple of days and giving extra days to these other months when they could have, had.
Yeah,
He
that was
says that
interesting.
the 12 ages are 2,160 years.
Yeah.
Part of that is, Jim, as far as why February is shorter, it's the 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 apparent motion of the sun, but the Earth moving around the sun, it's faster during Aquarius and Pisces. So those days are shorter. And then in the summer, the sun changes around 22nd or 21st as opposed to the 20th or 19th.
Right, so they had a day.
So the
every-
sun goes, the sun's apparent motion is faster then. So that's why they shorten the days, or that's one possible reason. The other thing,
Right.
talking about all this is, everything moves in a waveform, and they're always talking about, like in finance, they give you the nice diagonal, over time you'll make money. And it's like, no, there's ups and downs. Everything's in a sine wave, everything vibrates. The constellations, those stars could be drifting towards, away from themselves. The star could disappear, or, there's so many factors, and to try to say this is where something is impossible. There is no this point, it's just the Western, Cancer, Capricorn is kind of black and white. Like, here, well, I want the yes or no answer, but it's much more complicated than that.
Right.
The
I-
thing
I
is that
agree with you.
when we look at the night sky and we see constellations or whatever we see, we're really seeing it on kind of, it appears very two-dimensional for us, because we don't see how
The depth, yeah.
the distinction of the depth between the points. Because the constellation isn't created by a group of stars that are a similar distance from us, because they're varying distances from
Right.
us. It's no matter how they're located.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is that while the movement is relative, it is so slow that as to be all but imperceptible during a normal lifetime at 1 degree every 72 years. The reality is that the stars are, over the long period, they're moving at slightly different rates. So some stars might actually move a little more than a degree in 72 years, while others will move somewhat less than 7 because of their actual relationship to us in terms of distance. I mean, our galaxy is 110,000 light years across, I think it is.
Can I
Something
raise
like
up a question here about 3 days? Because often when you look at 3 days represents how long theoretically the ancients thought that the sun didn't move. And those 3 days are when Jesus took a jump. A lot of other gods
Right.
suddenly whizzed into this 3 day period of coming from death to life, in terms of, especially with the
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
The sun
now,
rose
what
again.
causes that? What causes it that it appears to uh, not move? And what do we do with the numbers we put on those 3 days? Do we actually?
That's
Well, those 3 days,
yeah.
those like a large break.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
Well,
the eclipse
what
pattern, or it's the retrograde pattern, but between the sun and Earth, it's so minor. It's only 3 days where it looks like it stops. It doesn't do one of those kind of loopy things that if you look at Mercury in the sky, loops
yeah,
around.
But wouldn't
It
you also
actually-
look at numerology and what these numbers mean? From a Jungian point of view, or a numerology point of view, these numbers means different things. Like
Well,
1 is beginning, and then 10 is beginning again.
it
And 3 has a meaning, I can't remember what it is, and 5, and
it's
etc.
yeah.
I think that's also to take into consideration.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So, but the 3 days occur at the solstices, and what they're talking about is not that the sun appears to not move, but it doesn't get higher and it doesn't appear to get lower. So it's kind of like at that same elevation in
Stand
terms
still,
of
yeah.
declination, either north or south. It's either skimming across the southern horizon at that same point for about 3 days, and then you can start to see that it's starting to climb, or it's doing the same thing at the high declination, and now you can see that it is actually coming down. And so so the winter solstice was critical because is the sun going to keep going down and we're going to lose it? It's hanging there now. Oh, now it's coming back. Now we start celebrating. We do ceremonies to bring the sun back, and then when it starts moving up, we do celebrations to celebrate its return.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, yes, I mean, the Christian calendar is based on, pagan ceremonies for the most part. So,
Yeah,
they
which
had,
And
are
the,
all about the moon and the sun. Yeah,
yeah, and
the Jew,
relationship.
which, was,
the Jewish
pretty,
calendar is, the Jewish calendar is based on the movement of the moon.
mhm.
Right.
So is the Islamic calendar. Their months are based on the first lunar crescent. And that's how a lot of the ancients worked. I mean, their month would start with the lunar crescent. But they also knew that, those months were about 29 days long from crescent to crescent. And that wasn't enough to accommodate the full year. So then they had to do something. Yeah.
It
So we
doesn't
get,
make sense that February has 28 when you've got
I know.
31 in January, you have 31 in March, right? So why didn't they just take the other day and put it in like somebody just mentioned? It's just
Yeah.
weird. We weren't
I
around
know.
at the time, Sean, so we don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we can, you can blame Pope Gregory for that one or the uh, priest, mathematician, scientist that he assigned the task of creating the new calendar.
They
Why they
must
gave
have
February
had a
28th, who
reason. They
knows?
must have had a reason though.
Oh, probably there was somebody born in February that they didn't like. I don't know. And I mean, for some reason, they took the days out of, in case of the British Empire and America, they took the days out of September when they switched from Julian to
Mm.
Gregorian. It's like, what the hell? Why?
And what's their
Why?
does anybody know the history? I think they used to have the zodiacs or the months, the zodiac signs and the months start on the same point, and then they shifted it just to kind of confuse people, or if they weren't astrologers, they would not correlate it. I mean, my rule of thumb is I add 9 or 10 degrees to once the first of the month, so I can calculate someone's sun position off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know if that's a rumor or what.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That I haven't looked into in terms of why the dates got set up the way they were. But they wouldn't. The problem would, of course, be if, uh, well, yeah.
It's always shifting.
See, the reason it takes the sun basically not quite 30 days. It takes just over 30 days to go from sign to sign, is because the signs are all 30 degrees.
Right.
In the wintertime, Scorpio, let's see, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius is when the Earth is moving closest to the sun, because we are at our closest to
Right.
the sun in early January, and we're at the farthest from the sun in early July.
Right. And then all the
Which,
another way to think about it is, growing up as a kid, they always had, everything is going around the sun in a circle, but it's always an ellipse. So you have the, ellipse has two focal points instead of one like the circle. So
Mhm.
it's always an egg shape. There's one side that's a little quicker and one side that's a little slower in our Earth thing. And then like
Yep.
Pluto's a huge difference. Like it's in Taurus for about 36 years, give or take, and Scorpio only 13. So it's a big egg shape, but that's another reason why the physics of this we're talking about happen.
Let
Mhm.
me interject something here.
Yeah.
Both the Arabs and the Jews start their day, and we just went through Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
The evening
Mhm.
of
Sunset.
evening starts the new day. Now, the reason for that is that the longest day for the longest work basically is from Cancer down to Virgo or so, when they had more time to go out and fiddle around with their agriculture. I think that is one of the reasons that they had that fascination, because that would explain the fact that they would not only have light longer, but it enabled them to work longer in the season when their agriculture needed the most attention, because the spring would be when you plant, but the rest of it now is where you harvest or cultivate the growth. So I think that's kind of because it just is a built-in problem. If you did, Well, in fact, it's the first star. You have to be able to see the first star. And so I just think that that's two things. One thing, it screws up the fact it's a lunar calendar, but the second thing, it is able to be thought of as of that kind of a situation. And then the other side of it is that the days get shorter and you can't go out and
Yeah.
you know, you can get snowed on or something.
Mhm.
It's a good thought. I was thinking that too, Spencer, about the agriculture and
Oh, yeah.
the days of this is a weird one, but 28 days is a menstrual cycle. Would they throw that in there for some reason? I don't know.
Could be.
You know? Because why
Did it for the,
wouldn't you make it? Yeah.
Gave the ladies 1 month.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a
Um,
natural cycle. It's, you know, the moon is representative of women, and it's, yeah.
That's true.
Though, what's interesting is there's also the story about the man in the moon. And at one time, in some cultures, the moon was masculine, not feminine.
Oh, is that why
When
they
was
used to go by
that?
it? When was that? A long time ago.
Babylonian things, the sun and the moon were kind of having a relationship where I think the word for sun was masculine, you see. And I think that was part of the death of the goddess. We
Yeah.
let Babylonians do that.
Has anyone heard of Hipparchus?
Yeah.
Hipparchus, he devised a method by which to name the ages regarding precession around 127 BC. It's like an astrological age, it says, has been defined when a constellation or superimposed sidereal zodiac in which the sun appears at the vernal equinox. So it's like, what's the constellation at the vernal equinox? I guess about 4,000 years ago, at the beginning of the age of Aries, right? That's when it would be the first point of Aries. But now we've gone 2 ages where the constellation rising on the vernal equinox has gone from Pisces, and it should go into Aries by it's every 2,160 years. So they're saying by his method, the age of Aquarius would technically start like 2150. I think you mentioned that date as well.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. It's like the constellation sitting on the vernal equinox, and this 1 degree every 72 years, it'll go a whole sign in 2,160 years.
Okay. Well, okay.
I think.
Right. Here's one thing. Okay. Get this in your head. Okay. Constellations and signs are not the same thing.
No, I'm not saying they are.
But you just used the two terms when you made that statement. You said constellations and then you said signs. They're not the same thing. When we're talking precession,
I'm talking about the signs. I'm not talking about the constellations. I mean
Right.
the signs.
Yes. Okay. So I think, from a practical standpoint, when we're talking about astrology, we can forget about constellations because they have nothing to do with modern astrology of any type. They have to do, modern astrology is,
They're just the mythological foundation upon which the signs are based.
yes. But beyond that, I mean, if you want to talk about the origin of Aries and what Aries means, you could talk about the constellation of Aries and its mythology.
No, I was
But
just saying how Hipparchus figured out how to go from the age of Aries to the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. He had a method. That's all I was just pointing out.
Right, yes. And he was doing that based on using the 360-degree circle and the 1230-degree
Oh, I agree.
signs.
Yeah.
Right. And I think to me, it's kind of like, it makes everything neat. It's kind of like, it's kind of like having a 24-hour day and not worrying about, when sunup and sundown are so much, because it's 24 hours. They're all 60 minutes long. Each minute is 60 seconds. It's all nice and neat. As opposed to some older ancient systems where literally they divided the day, and they would divide the day into 12 equal parts and the night into 12 equal parts. So a long, whether the day was long or short, it didn't matter. It was 12 hours. The nights were all 12 hours. So some hours were shorter than others, and some, longer than others, depending upon the time of the year. And so I think the idea of having 12 signs, 30 degrees really simplifies everything. It makes it all nice, neat, and simple to work with, rather than trying to line everything up with the actual constellations. So that's all of this. And so, yeah, the constellations are, they go back pre-recorded history. The signs, they came about early in the late BC period, probably starting around 300 BCE or thereabouts, where the Greeks started to really work out things and to simplify things.
Thank goodness.
Okay, so we're basically done. Here's some references. Here's some websites. There's the software that I use, SolarFire 9, Sirius 1.3, and Starlight 1.0, which is the only astrological software that actually works with the fixed stars and parens and heliacal rising and setting. SolarFire will give you some parens, but they're not as accurate as Starlight. It was created by Bernadette Brady.
Can I ask a question here about this situation? It's very just goofy technical. Now, I happen to have solar fire, but I just saw what you had, and I wondered if I wanted to dig deep and buy this other system, how hard it is to put, my large memory system here of clients and things I want to remember. How hard is it to make that transfer of data to that second, the Cirrus, the one that you were talking about?
Sirius or Starlight?
Stars.
Starlight, which is the program for the stars. I don't know. It's an old program. I bought it 10 years or more ago, 15 years ago. I don't know. I'd have to look at my old email to figure out when I got it. It hasn't changed or been updated since it came out. The astrological charts that it does are fairly limited and simple, but it will give you it will generate a report based on the heliacal rising and parens of the stars. If any of you would like one of their reports, let me know and I can generate it for you with my software, or you can actually go onto their website, which is zintara.com, Zyntra. And you can order one from them and pay for it, not that much. But if you want, I can do one for you and send it to you. And you can see what it's like, and it's really quite interesting. And it does, when you start looking at it, because I was looking at mine earlier this morning, and I got it. I mean, it's so old; it's installed on an older computer, and because this computer doesn't have a CD drive, and I don't. I'd have to dig up my old CD and I tried to install it on here, but I wasn't able to get it done.
So now,
So,
which of these two do you like better?
well, I think from a practical astrological perspective, SolarFire, simply because, the flexibility of charts and the like. And, we don't talk about fixed stars. We
So
really
what's
rarely
the
talk about the fixed stars in
what's
terms
the
of
second one that you like? Did you like the Starlight or
Sirius.
the other?
Well, I have Sirius because it has some more features in it, though I don't like the way it does charts. And what I like to do is it uh, it will easily display the heliocentric planetary nodes in a geocentric chart.
Ah,
Plus, I can use it to quickly, I can have it open where I'm looking at like the mean lunar nodes, mean black moon and such, while
ah.
having the true open in solar fire.
Ah,
And
interesting.
as far as starlight, I use that occasionally when if I really want to look at what's going on and from a fixed star standpoint.
Okay. Okay.
So James, I have a question about Bernadette Brady's program. So I
Huh.
remember when she came out with it, there was, she was suggesting that the old ways of looking at fixed stars and their location, putting them in charts, just really wasn't accurate, wasn't how the ancients did it. I mean, did you ever sort of do a comparison, or do you know if anybody actually did a study? I mean, she seemed to suggest that, but I don't know if people ever really researched it or.
I don't know if any did, but yeah, I mean, because basically what the ancients would do is they would, again, with the idea of the heliacal rising, they'd watch the eastern horizon to see what rises before the
Right.
sun.
Right.
With parents, they would look to see where, if like, the Sirius is rising, and Mars is directly overhead. That creates an aspect, parents for them, which is just another word for aspect. Because their basic aspects were the four cardinal points, the ascendant, the descendant, the MC, and the AC, or IC. And that was from that they created their mythology, their rules in terms of what that would mean.
Mm. Well, now I've forgotten, which one does Brady do? Does she do the parents or the heliocentric?
Both,
Oh, she
because
does
they're
both.
different, right?
Okay.
Because heliocentric is just
I was
about
trying to
what.
remember.
Yeah, so your heliocentric star is the star that rose before the sun. That was the last major star that rose before the sunrise, that you could see before the sunrise. That is your heliocentric star, and that's important for your whole life.
Yeah.
Then you have the parens are where you have the connection between a planet and a star, or maybe both are rising at the same time, or there is one is rising and the other's at the end, at the MC, or one is setting while the other is rising, or however that might go. So you're looking at squares and conjunction, squares, and oppositions, basically. That's how we would think of them in terms of astrological aspects.
I remember looking at that Brady star book, and I don't remember the details, but it was something about like if you have a star close to the horizon, that even if it's on the underside, there's certain ways to measure a star that it could be above the horizon. It just depends. There's different specifics, kind of like declination or something like that. But it was like,
Yeah,
there was a complicated formula that if you're near the horizon and you're under it, it could be above visually.
Yeah, the reason what happens is when you look at if you have a nice long clear eastern horizon, for example, you can see where like, okay, the sun rises here at winter solstice and it's over here at summer solstice, and all the planets for the most part will stay in between most of the time, but stars don't. I mean, you have stars that will only be visible part of the year because of the tilt of the Earth's axis and the appointment. And then you have other stars that are always visible because they're up here. And the thing is that doesn't equate to the zodiacal degree that we would put the star at.
Right.
And so what the concept of parens and heliacal rising and setting does is that it does it without regard to the zodiacal position of the object.
I gotta
So,
go.
okay, go. See you,
This was a
Spence. Thank you.
great.
Bye.
Thanks,
Okay.
Okay, so
Spencer.
Bye-bye.
all right, so
Uh,
here's for a coming schedule.
See you next
Uh,
month. See you in November.
Yeah, our next one is November 10th. We'll be looking at the election results, and we'll have an open mic for any questions that people might have.
Oh boy.
Then December, it's going to be on the 8th, and we'll take a outlook for 2025.
Sounds good.
And for our 25 schedule, well, we're still thinking about that one.
Sure.
Okay, there we
Sounds
go. That's
good.
done.
Okay.
Let me
Thank
you very
stop
much, Jim.
sharing.
Great job, Jim.
Jim,
There we go. Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you for hanging around, folks. You don't have to go yet. But okay, any
What did
questions?
he
Anything
say?
else anybody wants to talk about?
What did he say?
You don't have to go yet.
I said you don't have to go yet. I mean, what is it? Well, it is
Oh, it's
2:13, but
only
14.
12:15, 12:14.
You know, yeah, we actually this was a shorter one and we got done early, but yeah, so when you're talking astrology, talk signs. If you want to talk astronomy, then you can talk constellations.
Uh,
That's kind of the distinction.
I
Astronomers think in terms of constellations, astrologers think in terms of signs.
Mhm, that
Signs
makes
are all
sense.
30 degrees.
I've adopted, I always capitalize the S when I'm talking astrology signs as opposed to a street sign or something, just to kind of stick it in my head and to show people it's like this is a, you know,
This is important.
it's a
Yeah.
capitalized thing. Yeah, it's not. Of
Yes.
course, I'm biased, but you know.
Well, that's when when I write my stuff and I write about Jupiter or Mars, I write about them in their
Sounds like a song here.
mythic
What is it? When Saturn
gender.
aligns with Mars or something?
Yeah.
When
Okay.
Jupiter aligns with
When
Mars.
Jupiter aligns
That's
with
the
Mars,
age of Aquarius. Yeah.
Age of Aquarius, yes. Of
But
course, Jupiter
that
aligns with Mars
happens, yeah, every 2 years or so.
yeah, that happens frequently, depending on which alignment you're talking about.
Right.
But yeah, yeah. So that's why when I write, it's like I'll be talking about Jupiter, and I'll use a capitalized he, with the moon, the capital S for she, and Venus S for she, because I'm referring to that deity as such, in the mythic deity.
Sean, where did you say you went to school for astrology? Was it New York someplace? Your first school?
Who, me?
No, Sean.
Oh,
Sean?
Was it
oh,
was it astronomy or astrology? Astronomy?
it was
Oh no, that was
astrology, but I took in college. I took the physics of, you know, I did a lot. I have Saturn and Aquarius. I did a lot of math and science in grade school,
Mm,
and when my son progressed into Pisces, I went off to the movies. And later on, I met this guy, and he's like, "You have to talk to this woman," because we would have great conversations. I'm like, you know, I'll try anything twice. I'm Aquarian, you know. So it turned out to be Diane Rongren,
mm.
and I'm very Virgo, and I can say no, and I don't agree, and you're technically wrong, blah blah blah. When she started reading my chart, when I listened to the tape, all I did was say, "Yep, that's true, right?
Mhm,
Yep,
mhm.
yeah, I do that. Yeah." So I'm like, by the time I have my second reading, I'm like, I have to learn how to do this.
Mm.
So she pointed me in the direction of all her students that could
Mm.
teach me, and different. And then being in LA, there were so many astrologers.
Yeah.
And then I kind of like, I'm like, I got on board. These guys aren't that good. And then she's like, all right, I'll teach you. So I got classes from her. And then she's like, I want you to get out in the world. I went to NCGR in LA, and I went to Carol Ryder's, and I learned and taught there for a while. So I've been exposed to quite a few people and many techniques. And that's, you know, Aquarius, we get that, the wavy line. I get into something and then I ditch it for something else. So I had a lot of teachers, and I admired Jim, though, the technical specific staying on point. But I just jump everywhere, and I look like a mandala, and whatever comes to my head, I start talking about it, or I have someone point out, you know, what do you see, and then point out something, and I bring up these techniques I learned from all different people, and you could see I'm not that deep in them. I'm maybe a jack of all trades. I don't know, and not a master, but I sure have fun, and people usually, you know, get something out of me when I'm delineating.
To get to
Yeah.
your question, Rita, it was Michael that was talking about having taken an astronomy course in New York.
Oh, it's Michael who
Uh-huh.
said that.
Sean, are you familiar with the Lagrange points?
I've heard of it. I don't think I've studied Lagrange. What's that about?
Take a look at it.
Okay. How do you
It's a
spell that?
kite. And from an astrological perspective, it's a kite.
Now, this is more of my interest in psychology, but when did each of you first get interested? At what age did you first get interested in astrology? And maybe Sean just shared his.
Sure.
What was yours, Jim? When did you first get interested in it? Just
Well, growing up on a farm in the dim nights of eastern South Dakota, where I didn't have to worry about light pollution, I always loved to go out at night and watch, look at the stars and find the planets and things like that. So I've been interested from a astronomical perspective for a long
right,
time.
right.
And I would, occasionally when I'd come across one, I'd read my horoscope in the paper or something. I thought, that's
Mm-hmm.
not so bad. So it's kind of like been there, but I didn't get into it hook, line, and sinker until mid later '90s when I attended a introductory astrology class here, not far from where we live, and that bit me, and I started taking classes from that woman, Louise Litzenberg. Went through a couple of sessions with her, and then she stopped teaching because she had to family obligations she had to deal with. And about that same time, then, shortly after that, my wife Susan was working as assistant manager at the Imagine Center, which was a nice metaphysical store down on Ventura Boulevard. And a guy by the name of Jim Scher shows up from Oregon who was looking for a place to teach astrology classes. And, so we hooked
Yeah, I
up.
know of Jim Scher, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's like, hello.
Yeah,
That was where
sure.
I took off from.
Okay.
I
Interesting.
acquired my library. I acquired a vast knowledge of things that make sense and don't make sense, and kind of goes from there. Specifically,
Name and
Sharon, take a look
age.
at when you look at
Yes.
the Lagrange points, think in terms
Yeah.
of the astrological aspect pattern of a kite, and think in terms then of the 60-degree angle, the sextile, and how it pertains to the Lagrange points.
Just as you're describing that, Jim, you've approached it just like a Virgo would approach it, you know?
I are what I are.
You are what you are.
Yeah,
You have to
and
learn to live with
yeah,
it.
and the other thing, Sean, is I don't know of any other astrologer that talks in terms of anything other than the moon going void of course. But I mean, I look at it when, Mercury, Venus, the sun,
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh,
Mars, when they
definitely.
exchange
Yeah.
signs.
Right. Definitely.
You know.
And especially now with all the outers hovering on or around the 29 degrees, the critical, it's like,
Yep.
and all our moon voided courses now are very short because they're in different
Yeah.
modalities. So they're all functioning to be the last
Yeah,
aspect
it's
typically.
So what's your take, James, on the other planets going void of course? I mean, I've heard enough people
I
talk about void of course. It seems to be just, I mean, they talk a lot about moon void of course, but what I think is interesting is it doesn't actually connect with your own chart. I mean, your own chart could be making aspects. So
yes.
how have you integrated that? And I'm curious how you've integrated the larger planets, or maybe that's a
From
course in and of itself.
yeah.
But
So I look at it as essentially the same thing as with the moon void of course, i.e., if Mercury is void of course, I kind of equate that to being similar to a short Mercury retrograde without a do-over. Those same kind of I would
What'd
apply
you
those
just
same
say?
kind
It's
of
a what?
concept.
It's a what'd you just say?
Mercury retrograde without a do-over.
Oh.
Okay. In a retrograde, you've always got a do-over because you got a three-peat. In the first pass, something may happen or come up, and you may or may not think much of it, or you may think you've solved it. But when it goes retrograde over that same span, then that's when it really comes up and you realize, oh, I do need to deal with it, or I didn't finish it. And so then the third pass is when, your opportunity to fix it, to do it over and get it right. But in a void of course, you don't
Hopefully.
have that option. It just goes through it and it's like on to the next one.
how do you
With
interpret void of course? I mean, the only I never really found people were interested in void of course until very recently. And the only thing I've heard people say is, well, if you start something on a void of course, nothing comes of it. That's really the only thing I've heard people say. So I'm curious if you have
that's
other
One
thoughts.
possibility, I'd say. One possibility.
yeah, it's one it is one possibility. I think the other thing is that Also, when it's void of course, it can be kind of a confusing or mixed energy because what's happening? Well, it's left an aspect that's now separating, waning, getting weaker. There may be another aspect that it's applying to a planet in the next sign that's starting to grow, but it's also trying to make the adjustment from whatever sign it's in to the next sign. So you're looking at now it's going at some point, and with the exception of the moon, for most planets, we were talking about the anaretic degree, 29th degree. Mercury is about the only one that moves fast enough to actually go void of course before it's at 29 something. But yeah, so you've got that odd adjustment period from like Aries to Taurus or Taurus to Gemini, where you're going from, you're changing mode and you're also changing element, and the two signs have nothing in common other than the fact that they're neighbors. And you know how neighbors can get sometimes.
Hmm.
In fact, the ancients called that um, there was a term. There's a term for it when when two planets are in adjacent signs or they're 5 signs apart.
Right. The
Um,
quincunx. or
well, that's the angle
inconjunct.
is the semi-sextile and the quincunx, but they had a word for it when they are they basically can't see each other
Oh,
because they
right.
have nothing in common.
Right.
They share nothing in common. I'll have to I haven't thought about it for a while, so I have to remember what that term is. And then you have the other
Hmm.
thing that happened with stationing Jupiter recently. Okay, it's stationed at 21 Gemini, but there's this thing called refrenation, which is where promised aspect doesn't materialize.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, now in the case of Trump, for example, his sun's at 22 Gemini, Jupiter stationed at 21, so that conjunction never really happened.
Right.
So any reward benefit or some of such that might come with the conjunction isn't going to happen for quite a while because Jupiter has to go back and then come forward again. So it's going to be sometime later, into next spring. I think
Mhm.
Jupiter leaves its shadow around the end of April,
Who are you talking about
April
right now?
30th.
So
Come
the failed attempt at his life, you
Yeah.
think?
It could, yeah. So that would be,
You're talking
yeah,
about
that would,
Trump's son? Is that who you're talking about?
well, it's, it depends on what you consider a Jupiter transit of the sun. It could be, yes, a successful attempt on his life. It could be that, you know, I doubt it's not going to take that long for them to resolve the issue of who's going to be president, because what's going to happen if they don't resolve it by January 20th, Kamala Harris becomes president. That simple.
Right.
Mhm.
It should be
Why?
that
Because
simple because she is,
vice president steps up to
yeah,
president. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's in the Constitution that way.
So
Though if you tie the
she
two
has,
together and you throw out both Harris and Biden, then who becomes president? Whoever the new Speaker of the House is,
Mm.
no,
because they're
thank
third in
you.
line. So that could be the third possibility. The other thing I'm thinking is that it could be that, he gets convicted, but the benevolent Kamala Harris as president pardons him for those
Oh,
sins that she
not
can pardon
likely.
him for.
Not likely.
Well, you know, I
I
mean,
don't think so.
she might, keep in mind that her only authority deals with federal crimes. The civil crimes, which involve, what he's owing all this, the millions he owes to the lady in New York and the New York stuff, the fraud stuff,
Mhm.
she can't pardon that. She cannot forgive that because it's not federal. She
Mm,
has no
Right.
authority to do
mm,
that.
mm.
The so the only thing she can pardon him for would be something of a federal nature. So if he's convicted, for example, of retaining secret documents that he shouldn't have, uh, of interfering with the election, which he shouldn't have done, something of that nature. It's like, the guy's almost 79 years old, for crying out loud. He's fat and old. And you know,
Yeah, but
what you're gonna,
Jim, come on now. You know we're there too, but so
yes, I know, but I
well,
mean,
but I think the
I'm talking
problem, Jim, is you're
realistically. I
saying
mean,
it's
I'm old,
okay.
you know,
You're saying it's
so
okay when you partner it. It doesn't matter how old he is.
yeah, so I think
And you're
because
saying
of the fact,
wealthy people get off.
right, yeah,
And
All
wealthy
that's-
people
true.
get off.
Yeah.
Plus, he's an ex-president who gets Secret Service protection. So if you put him in prison, what are you going to do with the Secret Service? Are they going to go, you know, they're going to have a joint cells, or are they going to just stand outside the cell guarding him to make sure and walk with him when he goes out in the yard to make sure somebody doesn't, you know, slip a shiv in him or something? So I mean,
Maybe.
the practical point of
You
that you
think
could
it'd
put
be
him in one of
safe
the, you know,
enough,
the more
wouldn't it?
luxury
Well, that's not our
prisons or
problem.
something. Yeah.
But
So I mean,
James, back to
it
the question
becomes,
of,
Right.
Oh, the moon
back
void
to
of
the
course.
question of void of course, though. I mean, this is a
Oh,
big
I
good
got one.
discussion for next week, but void of course. So
Yes.
basically,
Yes.
you're saying that your experience of when planets go void of course as opposed to the moon, is this just a period of confusion? Is that the best way to summarize what you were saying?
yeah, that and the fact that you can, I treat it like a little retrograde where or an out of
Yeah, but-
bounds where the planet doesn't have to follow the rules as closely as it might otherwise. But yeah, the
Not have to
confusion
follow
is going to be
rules.
more appropriate because for the most part, you're looking at a planet. It's like with Mars is going void of course soon. And but it's, you know, it's at the 29th degree of Cancer and moving into zero Leo, and it's moving at less than 40 minutes of arc a day. So it's, you know, it's like right there on the, you can see the fence. You know, it's like just at the gate and they're just waiting to get there. So it's, yeah. So it's
Well,
more,
doesn't
it's that
that mean
an
that
emphasis is on that 29th degree energy.
Kind of like
It-
an old manual slipping out of gear and in neutral when you're going along or something, maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah. Other Judith, other experiences I have with moon void of course is delays, and or it doesn't come out how you think it will. It
Yeah.
changes. So that's a couple
Mhm.
more things besides it just won't happen. You know, I mean, they'll use the what was the Titanic sunk on, you know, it voyage was on a moon void of course, but that's just one example. So, and then again,
pretty
there's
big
events and then there's
example.
people's
So-
charts, you know.
But was the
Just-
moon void, of course, when it launched?
Yeah.
Was
that's
it
a
void, of
question.
course, when
When it
they
set
began
sail, yeah,
construction?
right.
Yes.
See,
That's a
the thing
question.
with when you're talking about moon void, of course, and they say, well, it's, you know, it's like if you start something when the moon is void, of course, nothing much will come of it.
Wouldn't,
Okay,
wouldn't,
what constitutes starting something?
Right.
I mean, it's like
Did you think
if
of
you
it
have an
before?
idea,
Right.
yeah, if yes, Cornelia.
Idea was that?
Wouldn't-
I mean, let's say you send out an invitation under void of course. Whose idea was this? Where did this first come from? Because I don't remember it in my early years of studying astrology. I've only heard some astrologers
I-
repeating it a lot lately.
I don't
You
know.
guys
What
know
I
where it
I
came
wanted
haven't
from?
to
looked at when
ask,
did
what I
Huh?
wanted to ask is void of course kind
Wait a
of
minute, before
like,
you ask a new question, does anybody know the answer to who first started this idea of void of course? I mean,
no.
I've only recently heard it, you know, like one astrologer repeats it all the time, but in my training over God knows how many years, we never talked about it. No
how
one ever
does it
talked.
how does it relate to an unaspected planet?
Well, that's different. So we don't know where it started or when it started then. I'm just curious if you guys know, because
No, I don't know when
No,
it
I don't,
started.
but I'm looking.
you're searching, okay,
It started
that's
for
kind of
me.
you.
It
I
started
think
for
it's-
me when Jim started talking about.
Yeah, I think it's very old, but I think moon void of course and Mercury retrograde are the two catchphrases that newer or people are curious in astrology cling on to or know. It's more prevalent. So people use that as, you know, everything's clickbait now. And if you say those two phrases or one of those phrases, people are more familiar with it and they'll go, oh, that's astrology. I know that, you know.
Mhm.
But isn't it
That's one
true
thing.
that a planet void of course is similar to for a period of time, an unaspected planet?
Okay.
And there-
So here's one from J. Lee Lehman from like 2003. She says, the void of course moon has been listed as a debility or weakened since Arabic times.
Oh, okay.
However,
Very
listing it
old,
as
yeah.
debilitated is one thing, coming up with a cogent meaning is another. So what did the ancients mean by believing it weakened? What continuity is there with modern astrology thinking? And how can we use these ideas in application? These are the issues this article attempt to address.
Okay.
I
Thanks.
think, I think that, the moon's in a, finishing a sign that it's in, not a constellation. And it's got a sign, one way to look at it, it's a style. And so you're trying to do the style, but it needs an aspect to activate or do something. So the style it's in, it's not going to connect with an aspect anymore. So it's got to go to the next style, and you kind of have to shift gears before it makes another aspect, and it'll have to do your project in that style or relative to the aspects and whatnot. That's one way to look at it.
So
Mhm.
we just had Mercury void, of course. So I don't know how long does it last, because at 12:36, Jim says it goes direct again. So we were in the middle of our session. Did anybody notice anything? Did anybody
I did.
feel
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah,
Did you?
we started out, we were kind of talking, I don't know, I haven't been in this group for a while in the beginning, but it's like we're kind of hitting all things and we're kind of all blending.
All over the place?
But then, yeah, and then I could tell Jim, like, he's very polite, but he's started to interject, like, okay, I got to start the meeting now. And then it's like,
Mm,
we got going. And then I noticed too, and this is typical too, when you're performing, I mean, you're directing this whole show, Jim, and you did a great job. Thank you, as always. It's like there was a certain point where he got really focused and really into it, where the beginning, usually, an actor, you got to kind of, or athlete, you got to warm up and get into the moment. And that's very hard to be 100% on point in the beginning. And I noticed he ramped up, and then bam, he was like, I'm like, he's in the mode. And I looked at I'm running, I don't even have a program. I'm just running the astroseek.com, astro-seek. And they have a live, you can set it to your time zone, a live calendar or a live wheel. And I'm like, oh, there's Mercury. It's gone into Scorpio, and now we're getting really deep. And again, I thought that was great timing because of mythology and the Scorpio going deep into what these meanings are.
But you've
I
got
just put
Jim and
the
myself and you all as Virgos, and Mercury affects us greatly.
Yeah. Well, I have a Virgo ascendant, but yeah, I'm born just
Oh.
before the Uranus Pluto
But
conjunction
then
in
it
Virgo.
doesn't, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
um,
it's in my first house or second, 12th house.
I
I feel
just
you.
posted
I like you.
I just posted the link to that article by Dr. Lehman, Julie
Okay.
Lehman. It's
Thanks,
on her
Jim.
website, but it's
Thank you, Jim.
hiding in there. So yes, I hadn't really thought too much about it myself, but I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah,
Well,
it's like,
Well,
where do these
my
things come
girls have just started studying astrology the last couple of years, and one of them it's all she'll talk about. And I'm like, oh my God.
Hmm.
What a cool mom. How cool. That's great. My
Well,
mom was like, yeah.
mom's skeptical of new ideas until I understand them better.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm so cool in their view.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Other than Cornelia's book, which is yet to be published, does anybody know of any really good new astrology books?
Hmm.
The reason I ask is I haven't really gotten any. I haven't bought any in a long time, and I'm looking for. Well, of
haven't
course, I
looked
need to
at
get my.
any new books. They have some new ones coming out, but I don't remember what they are.
Yeah, so many more.
You know what?
I just don't do cookbook.
You know what I really, really enjoyed reading lately? I mean, it's been a year or so, but the local astrologer, Ravi, sorry, I forgot how to pronounce his name, came out with a book on James Bond. And
Oh.
Yes. I
Did
know
you
who
read
he
it?
is.
Yeah.
No,
So
I was thinking about it because I
it's
was
a
in a
great
group with
book, and
him.
I'll tell you why it's a great book. Because you can't really put it down, because he's actually telling you all these really historical stories in the context of the astrology charts. So
Right.
he'll talk about the astrology charts of the actors who played James Bond, and he'll talk about the astrology. Well, he actually starts with the author Fleming, the British author of the James Bond, and his chart, and his actually story and his role in society in Britain historically, and his
Right.
family. And it's actually really fascinating, because you read all about, Fleming and his family and his role with the MI5 and, his schooling. And then he goes into the charts of the actors, and then he goes into the charts of the producers of the Bonds movies. But the stories are so fascinating because they're like the difficulties of Fleming's life and his relationship with his mother and the producers who couldn't get the money, but they knew it was great books. And actually, I couldn't put it down. I thought, well, this is actually one of the better astrology books I've come across in a long
That's
time. I
interesting.
had a lot of fun reading it.
Oh.
If you
Yeah,
like
that's
history,
Ra.
which
Ra used to
Ra,
be in
yeah, Ra.
Sheldon's group. Ra,
Ra.
right.
Yeah, it's just a fun book, actually. And you like history, you get all this history with it.
That's an interesting thing, yes.
You see, I have Mercury at
You know
zero
what his
Virgo.
last words were when he died?
Who's
Fleming's?
Flemings are on.
Fleming.
Yeah.
Fleming? What?
He said, I've had a ball.
Good way to look
Apparently
at it.
he did. He did.
Yeah.
Who was going to say
Um,
something? Somebody was going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say that
James.
with Virgo intercepted in my ninth house and Mercury at zero Virgo, I no longer have the attention span to be able to sit down and read a whole book.
Mhm.
So, I mean, my astrology books are basically there for references when I can find them.
references.
Right.
Um, so I
What do you mean
file
by
the
that?
system.
They're references. I don't know what you mean.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's one that I've read a couple of times, and that was one by Lewis. Let me see if I can find it.
G. Lewis?
Yeah, let's see.
Think he has an initials.
Doo-doo-doo-doo. Useless. Is it not Lewis? Is it oh, it's Anthony Lewis, MD.
Oh.
It's called. Is that the one? I have to. I'm not even sure if that's the one. But he goes into a lot of information. Talks about horary. Talks about some of the fixed stars and some of the ancient medieval things. So he kind of like talks about a lot of stuff. It was just sufficiently fascinating for me to actually have read it. But that was like 20 years ago when I was still reading more stuff. Lately, it's like too much. I need to just, my mind fixates on one thing and then it goes there, and then of course, sometimes on the way there, it gets sidetracked, and I keep looking at things like, I find serial killers fascinating.
Oh, I have a one for you to analyze.
Okay. There's and what else? Any number of things. Well, a lot of things. Lately I've been really probably over obsessing with archaeology and anthropology and all of the discoveries they're making as far as how the human race has originated and evolved over the years, back to our shared lineage with the Neanderthals and the Denisovans and other parent species that died out, other cousins that their lines ended.
I wish I knew more about astrology. For some reason, even though I'm a Virgo, I can't get it in my head, but I do love psychology, like finding your roots and seeing the connections. It would also be nice to see the connections from an astrological point of view from my clients, from some of these famous people or something. I really would enjoy more of that. I just don't know why I have such a block for astrology when basically you look at my chart and it goes, no, it should be a natural for you.
Well,
Is it Liz
and
Carr? Is it Liz Carr, the famous Jungian astrologer? I mean,
Linda Green?
no,
Liz Green. Are you talking about Liz
Liz
Green or
Green. Liz
yeah?
Green.
Yeah,
We're
triplets.
we're born within hours of each other in
Yeah,
the
I
same
mean, yeah.
location.
Oh
And
yeah,
Gemini.
your chart, her chart, my chart, they're very similar because we
Yeah,
were
we're
born
all
within a matter of 25 hours, I think, or
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Triplets from different parentage.
What's interesting is studying the charts of astro twins,
Mm.
like Darwin and Lincoln were born on the same day,
Hmm.
and they had a lot of things in common.
Yeah.
They both
I-
had children they lost and grieved over. I don't remember what
Mhm.
else, but there was a lot of similarities in their lifetime.
Yeah. It is interesting. Um, okay. Well, everybody, thank you again for showing up. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Judith,
Jim.
Tamar,
Thank
thank
you.
you for hiding
Thank
out there in the
you.
dark.
Thanks, Spencer, for us too. I know he puts work in there too. I don't know.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. So it was
All
good to
is good.
see you each
Um,
month.
Very much. And the election will be over next time. Oh, I can't
well,
wait.
the election will be done. Whether we have a final
Yeah,
decision
right.
or not is another question.
Right.
And
And how
that
many
was something
days
too
do they
that,
get to count those votes? Because we
We
may not
don't know.
vote count because the
well, normally, I mean, the
mail-in
actual
ballots have
vote,
to be in by when?
well, the votes,
Day
it
of
doesn't
the
take them that long to
election.
count the votes, but they actually have to come to a conclusion. What is it, July or sorry, July, December, somewhere, it's like December 11th or thereabouts, I think is when the electoral votes are
Yeah.
cast
Right,
at the
right.
different states.
Yeah.
And then they turn that in and it goes to DC. It has to be received by the archivist by the this year by Christmas, because it's the fourth Wednesday in December. Then the new Congress is sworn in on January 3rd. And on January 6th, Congress convenes to certify the election outcome.
What
And
I
we know
heard,
how that went last time.
what I've heard on the news just 2 days ago was that we had, last time we had that big 1-day eruption there. They're saying that the Trumpers are planning individual in cities and states and everything, like local
Mhm.
local
Oh, yeah.
protests and
Well,
riots.
yeah, I mean, if you listen to his speeches, he's encouraging them
Yeah,
to do those kinds of things, to get out
yeah,
there and to try to disrupt the voting. Um, and, in order to really disrupt it, they're going to have to, they're not going to be able to do much in those areas where you've got some states that are blue and they're going to go with Harris, and you got some states that are going with Trump, period. Nothing's going to change that.
yeah.
It's all in those swing states. And so that's where it really hinges. And at this point, we're not even sure, we talk about what, like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona as being swing states. But there may be some other states that are going to be swing states that we don't realize yet. Um,
Right.
and I give some credit to Trump for coming up with the idea of fake news, because there's so much out there now. You see these headlines, like Trump's way ahead, Harris is down, Harris is ahead, Trump's lost it
Yeah.
already, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, where's it? It's coming from somebody who's trying to, expressing their opinion. Um, some of that is to try to convince the other people not to bother to vote because you've already lost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of disinformation out there. So the truth is out there somewhere, and hopefully we will get a good truth come election night, or by the 6th, we
There's
will know.
supposed to be a movie on him coming
Thank
out
you all.
called The Apprentice
Yeah.
about how,
yeah.
The Apprentice.
So-
Yeah, it's about his time with the idea with the Apprentice. Yes.
yeah,
In
it's how
fact,
he was formed in that way, how he was
yeah,
molded.
the actor that plays him in that movie was actually on Graham Norton last night.
Hmm.
If you don't know who Graham Norton is, he's incredibly funny, probably one of the best talk show hosts in the world, and he's out of
Hmm.
England.
Hmm.
And his process is great because he'll have like typically 3 or 4 guests on, and they come on and they sit on a couch and they're talking together all the time. He will direct questions to each of them,
Hmm.
but they're all interjecting, and it's a great dialogue, and it's great to watch these people. Some of them know each other, some of them have never met before, and how they react and act on the couch. Yeah,
Hmm.
but anyway, okay, everybody,
Okay, thank
signing off.
you.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Appreciate you coming
Stay
out.
safe.
Thanks, Jim. Hey,
We'll see you on the 10th.
Yes.
okay.
Stay
Okay.
tuned for further developments.
I put a link.
Okay.
I put a link in the chat, Jim. There's a show about the 3-body problem.
Oh, yes,
What
that
you're
one.
hinting at. Yeah.
Yes.
Bye.
The three-body problem, yes.
Bye.
on
Bye.
Netflix. Yeah.
Okay. I'll look at that
Okay.
Lagrange. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Let me see here. I'm gonna do this. Want to. Oops. Okay. Yes.